The Map Inside. How Early Beliefs Shape Your World. Introduction. Have you ever felt ensnared in a relentless cycle, repeating the same errors with a desperate, futile effort to escape? Perhaps a clear aspiration of promotion, a healthier regimen, a more profound connection has hovered within reach, only to see your own progress inexplicably undermined as you neared its attainment. This is a profoundly vexing, often bewildering, predicament. You desire one outcome, yet an unseen force within appears to propel you in the diametric opposite direction. What if the most formidable impediments to your success, your contentment, and your fulfillment reside not in the external world, but are rather etched with indelible permanence into the very architecture of your psyche? This volume ventures into the profound notion that our lived experience is not merely a passive reception of events, but rather a dynamic interplay of how we perceive and interpret them. This perception is governed by an internal cartography, a conceptual blueprint dictating our understanding of the world's mechanics, largely constructed from foundational assumptions, or core beliefs, solidified long before our capacity for critical discernment emerged. Upon our nascent arrival, we are introduced to a world already replete with its own established protocols, its own narratives, and its own customary modes of operation. We do not enter this existence equipped with a comprehensive understanding of how to navigate its intricate terrain. Instead, our initial navigators, our progenitors, and those closest to us assume the role of instructors. They illuminate what holds significance, what portends danger, and what lies within the realm of possibility. Our education transcends mere verbal instruction, encompassing their comportment, the emotional tenor they exhibit, and the stories they weave about themselves and the wider universe. As we mature, our sphere of influence expands to embrace peers, mentors, and the prevailing cultural milieu. We absorb information from these diverse conduits, and given our youth and the still developing faculty for critical analysis, we frequently embrace this influx as unassailable truth. Consider a child perpetually labeled as clumsy. They may internalize this descriptor, coming to believe, at a fundamental level, that they are indeed clumsy. This is not necessarily an objective reality, but a deeply absorbed conviction. This uncritical assimilation is the genesis of our foundational map of reality, a composite forged from limited direct experience and an abundance of second-hand accounts. These deeply entrenched, often subconscious, assumptions and convictions coalesce into our core beliefs. They constitute the bedrock of our internal map, meticulously constructed by a younger, less sophisticated iteration of ourselves striving to make sense of an unfolding world. Once established, these core beliefs function as potent filters. Envision dawning spectacles that imbue every vista with a particular hue. Your core beliefs perform a comparable function for your consciousness. They dictate what captures your attention, how you interpret occurrences, and even what fragments of memory are retained. If, for instance, you harbor the conviction that individuals are inherently untrustworthy, you will be predisposed to notice and recall instances of betrayal. You may even construe neutral gestures as evidence of duplicity. This selective processing serves to preserve the integrity of your map. Your mind finds it less taxing to embrace information that aligns with its existing framework. To challenge a core belief can feel akin to a profound threat, for it destabilizes your entire worldview and, by extension, your sense of self. It is akin to dislodging a foundational cornerstone from a structure the entire edifice may feel on the verge of collapse. Consequently, our core beliefs are frequently relegated to the profound depths of our subconscious. They attain such an automaticity that we remain oblivious to their pervasive influence. Even when a core belief inflicts pain or impedes progress, such as the conviction I am not adequate, it offers a peculiar solace because of its familiarity. Our subconscious mind prioritizes survival and the known. It perceives greater safety in adhering to established patterns, however arduous, than in venturing into the uncharted territories of challenging fundamental assumptions. This is the crucible of self-sabotage, Our actions, despite the conscious mind's contrary desires, align with our deeply held, though ultimately detrimental, core beliefs. These convictions can sculpt our relationships, our professional trajectories, our physical well-being, and every other facet of our existence, often in ways that elude our conscious comprehension. This unconscious scripting can engender patterns we ardently seek to dismantle. We may subscribe to the belief that intimacy is fraught with difficulty only to find ourselves navigating a succession of relationships characterized by perpetual discord. Or we may internalize the notion that I lack sufficient intellect, subsequently shunning opportunities that necessitate the demonstration of intellectual prowess, thereby reinforcing the very belief we sought to overcome. The inherent paradox is that we frequently manifest the very reality our core beliefs purport to describe. Yet, here lies the encouraging truth. While these beliefs may have been forged unconsciously in the crucible of our past, their apprehension represents the inaugural step toward consciously charting a new course. We are incapable of altering that which we refuse to acknowledge. This volume serves as your guide through the intricate topography of your inner landscape. It is an invitation to assume the role of an archaeologist of your own mind, meticulously unearthing the core beliefs that have sculpted the contours of your life. Together, we shall examine their genesis, their persistent dominion over your thoughts, emotions, and actions, and, most crucially, the methodologies by which you can commence recalibrating your internal map to manifest a life that more faithfully mirrors your deepest aspirations and your loftiest potential. Throughout these forthcoming pages, you will acquire the acumen to identify your own core beliefs, apprehend their origins, discern their far-reaching ramifications, and discover practical strategies for redrawing your internal cartography. This is a voyage of profound self-discovery, one that will transport you from a state of unconscious subjugation to your past to a position of conscious agency, wherein you deliberately select the beliefs that will fuel your future. Chapter 1. Seeds of Belief. 1. Childhood Impressions. Our nascent years are a crucible of wonder, a period when the world unfurls before us as a boundless, uncharted expanse. We are akin to nascent sponges, avidly absorbing the tapestry of our surroundings. This is also the epoch when the most fundamental cartography of our lives is meticulously etched, often without our conscious awareness. These are not maps of terrestrial routes or geopolitical boundaries, but rather maps of existence itself, charts that delineate our identity, our latent capacities, and the mechanics of the cosmos. We christen these deeply ingrained notions core beliefs. Consider the perspective of a child on the cusp of cognition. Their grasp of phenomena is still in its formative stages. They possess neither the accumulated wisdom of years nor a fully developed faculty for critical interrogation of auditory or visual input. Should a parental figure, an educator, or even a peer impart information, particularly with an air of unwavering certitude, it is highly probable that such pronouncements will be embraced as verity. This is attributable to the fact that, within the nascent mind, these individuals are perceived as arbiters of knowledge. They serve as our navigators through this nascent and frequently bewildering realm. This is precisely where the concept of the unfiltered receptacle assumes significance. A child's intellect is characterized by an extraordinary openness. It resembles a recording device perpetually in operation, devoid of a discerning editor to arbitrate importance or veracity. Consequently, inaccuracies can insidiously bypass any inherent safeguards. For instance, if a child is repeatedly labeled clumsy following a succession of minor tumbles, they may begin to internalize, at a profound level, the conviction of their inherent ineptitude. They refrain from contemplative pauses such as contemplating, perhaps I am merely mastering locomotion, or it is plausible the surface was slick. They simply assimilate the appellation. This designation then becomes an integral component of their internal atlas, influencing their motor functions, their engagement in recreational pursuits, and their self-perception. The individuals populating our early lives exert a profound influence upon these nascent cartographies. Parents and guardians typically constitute the initial and paramount figures. Their utterances, their comportment, and their worldview directly sculpt our own emergent convictions. If a parent is perpetually beset by pecuniary anxieties, a child may develop the ingrained belief that financial resources are inherently scarce, necessitating perpetual apprehension regarding insufficiency. This is not predicated upon the child's personal experience of indigence, but rather upon their absorption of parental trepidation. Educators and other adult presences, such as mentors or familial confidantes, also assume a consequential role. Their commendations can foster self-assurance, whereas their critiques, even if unintentional, can sow seeds of doubt. Contemplate a child who is informed by an instructor that they possess an inability for arithmetic. This seemingly innocuous assertion, delivered by an individual vested with authority, can precipitate the conviction within that child of their mathematical incompetence. They may subsequently eschew mathematical instruction, grapple with increased difficulty due to an anticipated failure, and ultimately, their belief transmutes into a self-realizing prophecy. And then there are our contemporaries. The playground can serve as a potent pedagogical arena, yet also as a conduit for the assimilation of often unflattering lessons. The imposition of derogatory epithets by fellow children, exclusion from communal games, or the prevailing sentiment of the collective can engender indelible impressions. If a child is repeatedly subjected to the appellation of odd or unpopular by their classmates, they may internalize this perception. The imperative for social integration is so potent in children that they will frequently endeavor to conform, or will commence to subscribe to the negative labels affixed to them. This exemplifies the efficacy of social validation, even in its most rudimentary manifestation. The collective judgment, however fallacious, begins to assume the guise of verity due to apparent universal concurrence. It is imperative to distinguish between direct experience and vicarious information. While our personal encounters possess intrinsic value, the preponderance of our worldly knowledge, particularly during childhood, derives from the pronouncements of others. We acquire historical knowledge from texts and instructors, gain familiarity with distant locales through narratives and visual media, and learn the protocols of conduct by observing adults. This second-hand information is vital, yet it is invariably filtered through the experiences and predispositions of the informant. A child apprehends narratives concerning strangers and develops a concomitant apprehension of unfamiliar individuals. This constitutes a necessary safeguard, yet it is grounded in a second-hand admonition rather than a direct, adverse encounter with every unknown person. These nascent impressions are not merely dispassionate data points. They are frequently imbued with potent emotional resonance. This emotional imprinting is the very mechanism that renders core beliefs so tenacious and influential. When a child experiences profound shame subsequent to reprimand for an infraction, that shame becomes inextricably linked to the belief that they are inherently flawed or inadequate. Conversely, when a child experiences immense pride upon receiving commendation for an accomplishment, that pride can solidify the belief that they are intelligent or gifted. These emotional anchors imbue beliefs with a heightened sense of tangibility and significance. They transcend mere conceptualizations. They are visceral sensations that become interwoven into the very fabric of our identity. This emotional nexus explains why challenging these early convictions can feel profoundly perilous in later life. It registers as an assault not merely upon an idea, but upon a foundational constituent of our perceived self. Let us consider a specific illustration. Envision a young girl named Lily. Lily's father possessed considerable musical aptitude, yet he had perpetually been informed that his talents were insufficient for a professional career. He harbored a core belief that artistic endeavors are impractical and invariably lead to hardship. Lily, in her formative years, would frequently engage with her crayons, producing elaborate drawings. Her father, with the noblest intentions, would often proffer remarks such as, "That is a charming depiction, Lily, but have you contemplated your vocational trajectory? Perhaps a more secure pursuit." Or he might sigh and articulate, "The artistic domain presents formidable challenges." Lily absorbed these pronouncements. The affection she perceived in her father's gaze upon her artwork was subtly tinctured by his underlying apprehension. She also bore witness to her father's own understated disillusionment regarding his musical aspirations. Consequently, Lily began to formulate a core belief: creative pursuits are enjoyable, but they lack substantive importance in the practical exigencies of life. I ought to engage in a more utilitarian endeavor. This conviction was not engendered by her personal experience of financial privation or artistic failure. It was a second-hand lesson, deeply colored by her father's own regrets and anxieties. Years hence, Lily finds herself an adult possessing a remunerative occupation, yet she experiences a persistent sense of void. She has invariably harbored a profound affinity for narrative composition and artistic expression, yet she dismisses these passions as mere diversions, unworthy of serious cultivation. When associates encourage her to share her literary works or enroll in an art program, she might respond, "Oh, I am not sufficiently skilled for such endeavors, or it is merely a pastime." She is operating under the influence of the core belief she absorbed during her childhood, a belief that dictates that creativity is not a viable pathway to achievement or contentment. The emotional context of her father's well-intentioned yet anxious pronouncements, amplified by the pervasive societal narrative that art does not yield financial remuneration, cemented this belief. It became an integral aspect of her internal compass, guiding her away from her authentic inclinations because the alternative, the practical path, felt more secure and more congruent with the truths she assimilated in her youth. The inherent peril embedded within this early reliance on vicarious information and the pronouncements of authority figures resides in the circumscribed scope of a child's experiential universe. A child's world is frequently confined to the domestic sphere, the educational institution, and their immediate environs. Their comprehension of human nature, of diverse cultural paradigms, and of intricate societal architectures is exceedingly limited. When they are informed, for instance, that individuals from that particular region are inherently untrustworthy, they lack any first-hand evidence to contravene this sweeping generalization. The pronouncements of the authority figure become the definitive arbitration. This can precipitate the formation of stereotypes and prejudices that prove remarkably recalcitrant to dislodge later in life, not due to their inherent logical coherence, but because they were assimilated as immutable truths during a period when critical faculties were still nascent. These initial impressions, culled from the decrees of authority figures and the prevailing consensus of their social circles, and shaped by the emotional milieu in which they were received, constitute the very foundational elements of our core beliefs. They are the initial brushstrokes upon the canvas of our minds, creating the primordial map of reality. This map is not the product of exhaustive exploration, but rather of the constrained, albeit profoundly impactful, input of our formative years. It is a map that delineates what is attainable, what is secure, and what is veracious, all prior to our having had the opportunity to rigorously ascertain its accuracy. And because this map is charted so early and frequently reinforced by potent emotions, it acquires remarkable resilience, shaping our perceptions and behaviors for years to come, often in ways that elude our conscious awareness. It serves as the bedrock upon which we construct our entire understanding of ourselves and our place within the grand continuum. 2. Voices of authority. From the dawn of consciousness, we are cast adrift upon an immeasurable, uncharted sea. Arriving without compass, chart, or comprehension of the prevailing currents, our survival, indeed, our very capacity to decipher the world, hinges entirely upon the guiding hands, the whispered explanations, and the imperfect wisdom bestowed upon us. This profound reliance, this implicit trust vested in the adults around us, is not merely a symptom of vulnerability, it is the veritable engine driving the formation of our nascent beliefs. Consider the humble seedling. It harbors no doubt about the soil that cradles it, the sunlight that bathes it, or the water that sustains it. It simply absorbs, flourishes, and imbibes the character of its surroundings. In our earliest years, we mirror this process. Our parents, our grandparents, the gentle hands that first guide our grip on a crayon, these figures become the arbiters of our nascent truth. Their pronouncements are not suggestions. They are the very scaffolding of reality as we apprehend it. This is not a conscious deliberation on our part, it is a fundamental facet of our unfolding. Our minds are intrinsically wired to seek direction, to glean knowledge from those who appear more knowing, and to embrace information that ensures our safety and fosters connection. This inherent receptivity means that the declarations of these figures, these voices of authority, are absorbed with an unquestioning certainty that we seldom, if ever, reclaim in adulthood. For the young child, the world is a bewildering panorama. Each day unfurls with novel sights, sounds, and sensations. How, then, is a child to navigate this labyrinth through mere trial and error? Imagine a toddler teetering near a searing stove. Were they to learn this lesson through direct, searing experience, the consequences could be catastrophic. Instead, a trusted voice intervenes, offering a swift conduit to understanding. This is why figures of authority assume such potent roles as filters of information. Their pronouncements serve as ready-made rationales, prepackaged truths that enable us to traverse life's complexities without overwhelming our burgeoning intellects. We lack the accumulated experience and the cognitive apparatus to critically appraise every piece of counsel. Thus, we accept it, integrate it, and it becomes an integral part of our internal cartography. The very notion of certainty is inextricably entwined with authority for a child. When a parent declares, "This is the correct method," it transcends mere advice. It is presented as the singular, inviolable way. These voices do not merely illuminate the external world, they illuminate us. Consider the appellations we receive. A parent might exclaim, "You are such a wonderful helper," or "Your drawings are so ingenious." These seemingly simple phrases, imbued with the gravitas of parental approval, can become deeply entrenched core beliefs. They are woven into the fabric of our identity, shaping our perception of our own aptitudes and potential. Conversely, a negative designation, delivered with equal conviction, can wield comparable influence. If a child is repeatedly informed, "You are clumsy," or "You possess no athletic prowess," they may internalize this as an immutable verity. This is not due to its objective accuracy, but rather because the authority figure articulating the message is perceived as a reliable source of information regarding their very essence. Thus, an ostensibly innocuous statement can transmute into a foundational belief, a cardinal assumption that colors our self-perception and our capabilities for years to come. The subtle, and at times overt, modalities through which these messages are conveyed play a pivotal role. It is not merely what is articulated, but how it is expressed. The warmth infusing a parent's voice when commending a child can solidify that commendation as a core belief about their intrinsic worth. The solemnity with which a directive is enforced can embed that directive as an absolute moral imperative. A teacher's patient elucidation of a concept, delivered with encouragement, can foster a conviction in one's own capacity for learning. Conversely, a dismissive intonation or a sigh of weary resignation can convey a profounder message: "You are incapable of grasping this," which can then ossify into a self-limiting conviction. Children possess an uncanny acuity for the emotional undertones of communication. They perceive the certainty, the frustration, the pride, or the doubt in the voices of those upon whom they depend. And these emotions often amplify the resonance of the spoken word. This assimilation of information from figures of authority is magnified by our developmental stage. Our brains are not yet equipped with the sophisticated faculties of critical discernment characteristic of adulthood. We have yet to cultivate the capacity for questioning, for dissecting, or for juxtaposing divergent perspectives. Our cognitive abilities remain in flux, and our emotional understanding is nascent. This renders us inherently more susceptible to suggestion and less inclined to challenge the pronouncements of those we deem sagacious and knowledgeable. It is a biological imperative designed to facilitate the swift and efficient acquisition of vital information. Imagine attempting to navigate existence as a fully skeptical adult from the outset. It would be an overwhelming and isolating ordeal. Instead, our formative years are engineered for a rapid influx of foundational knowledge, with authority figures serving as the primary conduits for that transmission. Let us consider a few illustrative instances. Sarah's father, a man who held financial security in high regard, frequently avowed, "Money is the root of all evil. It breeds greed and unhappiness." Sarah, cherishing and confiding in her father, absorbed this dictum whole. As an adult, she found herself unconsciously undermining her own financial prosperity. Even when avenues for increased earnings presented themselves, a pervasive sense of guilt or a dread of succumbing to greed would impede her progress. Her father's words, delivered with the weight of parental wisdom, had coalesced into a core belief: greater wealth invariably leads to misery and moral decay. This belief, forged in childhood, permeated her adult decisions, erecting a self-imposed barrier to abundance. Then there is Mark. His mother, perpetually anxious for his well-being, would habitually caution him, "Be careful, you might fall," or "Do not ascend too high, lest you sustain injury." Mark internalized these admonishments not as specific directives, but as a generalized conviction regarding his own physical capabilities. "I am inherently accident-prone and lack coordination." As an adult, Mark eschewed physical endeavors that might test his mettle, from athletic pursuits to the exploration of novel pastimes like rock climbing. He harbored the conviction that he was simply not constituted for such activities, a belief directly inherited from his mother's incessant warnings, which had been accepted as an unquestionable truth about his own physicality and motor skills. Consider, too, the influence of societal institutions. Schools impart history, science, and social studies. Religious congregations convey moral and spiritual tenets. Medical practitioners offer counsel on matters of health. Media outlets shape our perception of current events and prevailing societal norms. Each of these represents a form of authority, and the messages they disseminate are frequently absorbed with the same uncritical trust as a child's faith in their parents. If a society's dominant narrative, as articulated by its authoritative voices, posits that diligent effort invariably yields reward even in the absence of universal empirical support, numerous individuals will internalize this as a foundational belief. When setbacks subsequently arise, they may assign blame solely to themselves, unable to reconcile their lived experience with the absolute truth they were indoctrinated with. The potency of appellations extends beyond personal attributes. Authority figures also assign labels to circumstances and experiences. A parent might pronounce, "This subject is inherently challenging," or "You are ill-suited for this pursuit." These designations, once internalized, can manifest as self-fulfilling prophecies. If a child is informed that mathematics is difficult, they may approach the discipline with a sense of foreboding and a preordained conviction of their destined struggle. This belief then morphs into a self-imposed impediment, rendering the subject genuinely more arduous for them. The authority figure's statement, perhaps intended as a mere observation or a means of tempering expectations, becomes a deeply ingrained core belief that dictates the child's future engagement with that particular domain. It is imperative to acknowledge that these voices of authority do not invariably harbor the deliberate intention of instilling limiting convictions. Frequently, their pronouncements stem from their own deeply held core beliefs, themselves products of their unique experiences, and the authoritative voices that shaped their formative years. A parent who endured penury might impress upon their child the tenet that one must meticulously conserve every coin, not from malevolence, but from a profound, ingrained apprehension of scarcity. A teacher who grappled with a particular discipline might deem it arduous for all pupils, oblivious to the impact this designation has on those who might otherwise have found it manageable. The intention may be benign, but the consequence can be the unconscious transference of a potentially deleterious belief. The sheer constancy with which these messages are disseminated further augments their influence. It is seldom an isolated utterance. It is a pattern of reinforcement. A child consistently lauded for their artistic flair will likely cultivate a core belief in their creative faculties. A child frequently censured for their comportment will likely develop a core belief that they are inherently bad or troublesome. This repetition functions akin to a sculptor's chisel, gradually molding the unformed clay of a child's developing psyche into a form that mirrors the beliefs being imparted. The voices of authority are the very architects of our nascent reality. They furnish the constituent elements, the conceptual blueprints, and the foundational framework of our internal maps. In the absence of a conscious understanding of this process, we embrace these constructions as unassailable truths. We erect our lives upon them, seldom questioning their genesis or their veracity. This uncritical acceptance is not a deficiency, it is a testament to our inherent drive to learn and to place our trust in those who nurture us. However, as we traverse life's trajectory, encountering circumstances and opportunities that may diverge from these early formed beliefs, we begin to discern fissures in the foundation. We commence to ponder why our meticulously crafted maps occasionally lead us astray, leaving us feeling disoriented, frustrated, or unfulfilled. The journey toward comprehending our core beliefs commences with the recognition of the profound imprint of those initial, authoritative voices. They did not merely utter words, they etched the very first lines onto the internal atlas of our minds. 3. Building the worldview. From the nascent stirrings of existence, we are cast into a reality already imbued with its own immutable decrees, its own tapestry of narratives, and its own unique vantage point. Envision a newborn, a minuscule cartographer embarking on an immense expedition, their gaze wide with the imperative to decipher the world. They arrive unburdened by instruction manuals, unadorned with pre-installed life operating systems. Instead, they possess an astonishing innate faculty for assimilation, an ability to absorb the world with the voracity of a sponge. This acquisition of knowledge transcends mere academic pursuit. It is a profound, organic saturation, a silent, ceaseless architectonics unfolding with every passing moment. It is through this genesis that we commence the construction of our inaugural cartography of existence, a schema destined to navigate our journey for years to come. Our apprehension of the veridical, the very bedrock of our cogitations and actions, is meticulously forged in these primordial epochs. It is akin to the erection of a dwelling. A robust foundation, an unyielding terra firma, is indispensable for the placement of the initial edifice. For us, this foundational stratum is composed of our most nascent convictions. These are not ephemeral notions, they are the profound, often concealed, presuppositions concerning our own being, our fellow beings, and the circumambient cosmos. They constitute the cardinal tenets, the bedrock of our personal psychogeographical atlas. Thus, by what alchemy is this atlas meticulously rendered? It is an astonishing metamorphosis, a confluence of direct sensory engagement and the imparted wisdom of others. Conceive of it as the reception of intellection from two primary conduits, two apertures gazing outward upon the world. One aperture is our direct experiential ingress. This is the epoch of tactile exploration, gustatory discovery, visual comprehension, auditory reception, and visceral sensation. It is the sting of a grazed knee from an unscheduled descent from a velocipede, the comforting embrace of maternal warmth, the exquisite flavor of a cherished comestible, the resonant timbre of mirth. These unmediated encounters are of paramount significance. They represent our sovereign discoveries. However, for the juvenile mind, this aperture is invariably circumscribed. The world of a child is intrinsically confined. Global peregrination is beyond their grasp. The nuanced complexities of existence elude their nascent comprehension and their faculty for processing. Sensory input remains in a state of nascent development. Therefore, while direct experience possesses an irrefutable reality and potent influence, it frequently proves insufficient for the synthesis of a comprehensive panorama. It is akin to endeavoring to apprehend an entire arboreal expanse by examining a solitary foliar specimen. It is here that the second aperture assumes paramount importance: vicarious intellection. This encompasses all that we glean from external sources. It is the pronouncements of our progenitors, the discourse of our pedagogues, the confidences of our companions, and even the narratives conveyed through the printed word or luminous screens. It is an unremitting cascade of messages detailing the mechanics of life, the essence of our identity, and the demarcation between virtue and vice, rectitude and transgression. From our earliest moments, we are immersed in the absorption of these transmissions. If a parental figure articulates, "Exercise circumspection, for the world is fraught with peril," that decree infiltrates our evolving cartography. Inversely, if we are apprised, "You possess a prodigious intellect," that too is incorporated. This second-hand intellection functions as a deluge, inundating the lacunae unaddressed by our restricted first-hand experiences. It is the genesis of our linguistic prowess, our cultural acclimatization, and the vast preponderance of our perceived verities. One might surmise that children passively embrace all utterances. However, the reality is somewhat more intricate. Even in childhood, we possess mechanisms for discerning veracity. We employ certain filters that facilitate the sifting of this vicarious intellection. These filters are not invariably conscious, implying a lack of deliberate cognitive engagement, yet they wield considerable influence. They guide our discernment of which messages resonate with greater authenticity or import. Three principal filters, unconsciously deployed by children, merit elucidation. The first is certainty. This pertains to the perceived conviction of the orator. When an individual conveys information with an unwavering tone, as if articulating an incontrovertible fact, its retention is amplified. Envision a parental figure asserting with absolute certitude, "Currency does not spontaneously manifest upon arboreal structures." The inherent certainty in their vocalization imbues this statement with the aura of universal truth. Were they to utter it with hesitant intonation, "It is my conjecture, though I confess uncertainty, that currency may not proliferate upon arboreal structures," its impact would be significantly attenuated. Children frequently place their trust in the perceived certainty emanating from adults. The second filter is congruence. This concerns the alignment between an individual's discourse, their comportment, and their emotional tenor. If a pedagogue professes, "The pursuit of knowledge is exhilarating," yet their countenance betrays ennui and their exhalations are protracted, sighs, the message becomes discordant. Conversely, if the pedagogue's ocular spheres ignite with enthusiasm, their vocalizations are imbued with dynamism, and their actions demonstrably reflect a passion for instruction, then the assertion, "The pursuit of knowledge is exhilarating," acquires an authentic resonance and is more readily embraced. Children exhibit a remarkable aptitude for discerning these subtle indicators. They perceive when verbalizations are harmonized with observable phenomena and felt sentiments from the communicator. The third filter is authority. This relates to the degree of trust or deference we accord the purveyor of information. Parents, educators, and other figures of established influence are perceived as authoritative. We often accord credence to their pronouncements by virtue of their authoritative standing. This is an intrinsic and indispensable facet of childhood, facilitating learning and ensuring safety. If a medical practitioner prescribes medication, its ingestion is predicated upon their recognized authority in matters of health. Analogously, a child is predisposed to accept their parents' pronouncements regarding the world's workings, as their parent constitutes their primary authoritative figure. Herein lies the profound and indeed perplexing nexus. For a child, these filters certainty, congruence, and authority operate with a far greater leniency than they do for an adult. A child's cognitive landscape is inherently more receptive, more predisposed to trust, and less equipped for critical interrogation or analytical dissection. When a trusted adult, articulating with unwavering conviction and exhibiting seamless congruence between their words and deeds, conveys a message, a child is overwhelmingly likely to assimilate it as an immutable verity. They lack the experiential ballast or the fully developed critical faculties to interject. Permit me a moment of pause. Is this assertion truly substantiated? Consider a young child, whom we shall designate as Maya. Maya's parents are diligent laborers but are frequently beset by financial anxieties. One evening, during the evening repast, Mia's father emits a sigh and pronounces, "Affluence is perpetually beyond our grasp. The expenditures are prohibitive. Ascending the socio-economic ladder is an arduous undertaking in this world." He articulates this with an air of profound weariness and unshakable certainty. Maya, who cherishes her father and places absolute faith in him, perceives his palpable distress. Her parents' words, actions, and general demeanor converge to convey a singular message. Existence is an arduous struggle, and financial prosperity remains an unattainable chimera. Although Maya might entertain a fleeting contemplation of a coveted plaything observed in a shop window, the deeply felt and authoritative declaration of her father eclipses it. Through the prism of certainty and authority, Maya unconsciously internalizes a foundational conviction: the world is a realm where advancement is impeded by adversity, and my capacity to procure desired possessions is likely to be constrained. This is not a consciously chosen cognition. It is an assumption that embeds itself deeply within her, becoming an integral component of her internal cartography. This conviction, precipitated in childhood, does not manifest as a deliberate selection. It is perceived as an intrinsic characteristic of the world. And because it is sculpted by a younger, less experienced iteration of ourselves, it possesses an inherent authority and innocence that we seldom challenge in adulthood. This child self was merely endeavoring to impose order upon the chaos, to secure a sense of safety and belonging. It absorbed the essential elements for survival and comprehension, devoid of the capacity to differentiate between absolute accuracy and long-term benefit. These nascent convictions, irrespective of their simplicity or complexity, become the bedrock of our adult Weltanschauung. They are the fundamental presuppositions upon which we construct our edifice, often without conscious awareness. This represents the profound resonance of our formative years. The worldview that is architected during childhood functions as a potent lens. It is a pre-programmed suite of spectacles that we perpetually wear. This lens not only shapes our visual perception but dictates the very modality of our seeing. It influences what we apprehend within our milieu, how we interpret encountered events, and what we deem even conceivable for ourselves and for others. Should Mia's cardinal conviction be that life is a perpetual economic struggle, she may unconsciously gravitate towards news reports chronicling financial hardship, interpret a marginal price escalation as a calamitous event, and overlook opportunities for financial aggrandizement because they diverge from her ingrained schema. Our early convictions are analogous to the initial lines of code inscribed within a computational program. They establish the fundamental parameters dictating the program's execution. If those inaugural directives or this undertaking is insurmountable or human beings are inherently untrustworthy, then the program will operate within those constraints, even in the face of subsequent revisions or contradictory data. The subconscious psyche, deeply invested in the preservation of these core convictions, prioritizes familiarity and perceived security even when that familiarity is intrinsically deleterious. It reinforces these convictions because they signify a known territory, a predictable, albeit potentially arduous reality. To challenge these deeply entrenched assumptions can evoke a sensation akin to the earth fracturing beneath one's feet, imperiling one's entire sense of self and comprehension of the cosmos. This unconscious imperative to uphold the existing order, to adhere to the familiar, is a formidable force that perpetuates the immutability of these early cartographies, frequently precipitating a recurrence of behavioral patterns that are antithetical to our adult aspirations or objectives. This intricate, frequently subconscious, methodology for constructing our internal map of reality lays the foundation for all subsequent developments. But what transpires when the architectural plans we have inherited, or the materials we have amassed, are found to be defective? The subsequent phase necessitates an understanding of how these initial constructions, however benevolent their intent, can commence to dictate not merely our perceptions, but our actions, and how such dictation can lead us into error. Chapter 2. Breaking the Chains. 1. Hidden self-sabotage. We often find ourselves yearning for a destination, yet our feet inexplicably trace a path in the opposite direction. We proclaim a desire for robust health, but the siren song of sugary confections calls us away. We envision financial liberation, yet our bank statements paint a starkly different tableau. We crave profound, authentic connections only to be drawn to those who leave us feeling hollowed out. This is not a testament to a deficit in willpower, nor a clandestine yearning for failure. It is something far more insidious, and infinitely more potent, the subtle architect of hidden self-sabotage. Consider it this way: you have a clear objective in mind, perhaps a sun-drenched idyll on a pristine beach. You meticulously pack your bags, chart your course, and anticipate the journey with unbridled enthusiasm. Yet, buried beneath the veneer of your conscious aspirations, a deeply held conviction lurks that this beach harbors unseen perils, or that you are undeserving of repose, or that the journey itself is an insurmountable obstacle. Thus, even as you prepare for the shore, a clandestine part of you might unconsciously pack woolen sweaters or plot a course through a dense, treacherous forest. You are not deliberately veering off course. Your internal compass, guided by these submerged, foundational beliefs, is simply directing you elsewhere. This is the very essence of hidden self-sabotage. It is the phenomenon wherein our actions, our choices, and even our thoughts conspire to undermine the very aspirations we consciously pursue. It is the silent, unseen force that yanks the rug from beneath our feet precisely when we are on the precipice of achieving our desired outcome. Its elusiveness stems from the fact that it feels entirely natural, even instinctual to us. It is simply the ingrained modus operandi, and our core beliefs have meticulously convinced us that this is the immutable order of things. A pervasive manifestation of this phenomenon is the deeply ingrained notion that success is inextricably linked to immense struggle. Many of us have absorbed narratives or experienced firsthand the dictum that life is arduous, and that only through profound effort and suffering can anything of value be attained. This can solidify into a foundational belief: struggle is the prerequisite for success, or if it comes with ease, it lacks true merit. Picture an individual who has toiled relentlessly to forge a thriving enterprise. They have poured their very essence into it, navigated a gauntlet of challenges, and at long last, their endeavors are beginning to flourish. Sales are skyrocketing, recognition is mounting, and opportunities abound. Yet, instead of unadulterated joy and profound relief, a disquieting unease begins to surface. They might find themselves subconsciously manufacturing obstacles. Perhaps they will overcommit to an untenable number of projects, precipitating burnout. Or they might become hypercritical of their own contributions, perpetually discovering flaws that exist only in their perception. They may even find themselves inadvertently undermining a crucial alliance or making a rash financial decision that jeopardizes the very success they so arduously cultivated. Why would an individual engage in such self-destructive behavior? Because their deeply entrenched belief dictates that success must be arduous. When circumstances become too facile, it feels inauthentic, unearned, and even perilous. Their subconscious mind, operating under the guise of protection and striving to maintain them within the familiar confines of their lived reality, signals that something is amiss. The comforting familiarity of struggle is being supplanted by the unsettling terrain of ease, and to return to a state of perceived safety, they unconsciously engineer a recurrence of struggle. They become the perennial underdog, not by choice, but because their internal compass dictates that this is the only authentic path to achievement. This is a formidable iteration of self-sabotage, wherein the very attainment we ardently desire triggers behaviors that actively repel it, all in service of validating an obsolete, constricting belief. This brings us to another critical juncture, the comfort zone of familiar suffering. It sounds paradoxical, does it not? How can pain ever be construed as comfortable? Yet, our core beliefs, forged in the crucible of early life experiences, establish a deeply ingrained paradigm of what constitutes normal and safe for us. This map of reality dictates our expectations and orchestrates our behaviors. If, for instance, your formative experiences instilled the belief that relationships are inherently fraught with difficulty and invariably culminate in disappointment, then a harmonious, affectionate, and stable partnership might feel alien and unsettling. Your subconscious might interpret this unfamiliar ease as an harbinger of danger or a profound lack of authenticity. To reacquaint yourself with the familiar landscape, you might unconsciously instigate conflict, adopt an overly critical stance, or actively push your partner away. You are not consciously endeavoring to dismantle the relationship, you are merely acting in accordance with your deeply held conviction that love is synonymous with pain. The pain becomes a predictable, albeit unwelcome, anchor. It is a known quantity. To venture beyond that known quantity, into the uncharted territory of happiness and ease, can feel akin to stepping off a precipice. The subconscious mind, hardwired for survival, prioritizes the familiar, even if that familiarity is a source of profound suffering. This explains why so many individuals, when presented with the prospect of genuine happiness, contrive to derail it, thereby reverting to the familiar ache that their core beliefs have rendered so profoundly comfortable. Consider the ubiquitous phenomenon of procrastination. We are wont to dismiss it as mere indolence, a deficiency in discipline, or an inherent ineptitude in time management. However, more often than not, procrastination represents a sophisticated stratagem of self-sabotage, a cunning tactic employed by our core beliefs to impede our progress towards our objectives. Envision a writer possessed of a brilliant literary concept. They recognize the imperative to commence writing, yet they find themselves perpetually diverted by other pursuits. They meticulously clean their domicile, engage in extraneous email correspondence, and lose themselves for hours in the digital ether of social media. It is not that they lack the desire to pen the book. They may luxuriate in fantasies of holding the finished manuscript, of basking in accolades. However, the very act of initiation, of moving towards that anticipated success, triggers a more profound apprehension. Perhaps their core belief posits, my most exceptional work emerges under duress. Consequently, they will defer and defer and defer, awaiting that last-minute surge of adrenaline. They have assiduously convinced themselves that this is the sole pathway to producing exemplary work. Or, perchance, their belief is, should my completed work be exposed, they will discern my inadequacy. By delaying completion, they postpone exposure, potential censure, and the confirmation of that deeply held fear. Procrastination thus becomes a shield, deflecting the perceived threat of success and its attendant repercussions. It is a means of remaining in a perpetual state of almost, wherein the dream remains untarnished because it has never been fully actualized and consequently never truly tested. The same dynamics manifest with profound efficacy in our relationship patterns. We may consciously aspire to a loving, supportive partnership, yet find ourselves repeatedly drawn to individuals who are emotionally detached, critical, or who consistently treat us with disrespect. This is not a capricious twist of fate. It is frequently a direct reflection of our core beliefs concerning ourselves and the nature of love. If, for example, your early experiences conveyed that love is conditional, or that you are unworthy of unconditional affection, you might unconsciously gravitate towards partners who corroborate that belief. A partner who is critical can serve to validate the belief, "I am not good enough." A partner who is emotionally distant can confirm, "I am unlovable." This might strike one as counterintuitive. Who would willingly seek to validate their own unlovability? Yet, recall the comfort derived from familiar suffering. If your earliest paradigms of love were tinged with hurt or neglect, then a smooth, effortless love might feel alien and untrustworthy. The familiar pain of a challenging relationship, though injurious, is known. It aligns with the narrative meticulously constructed by your core beliefs. Therefore, what are the specific, observable behaviors that appear to be disconnected from our core beliefs, yet are in fact their direct manifestations? They are the myriad of minute choices we make daily that subtly steer us away from our intended destinations. It is the missed alarm clock on the morning of a crucial engagement. It is the impulsive purchase that derails a carefully crafted budget. It is the vitriolic self-recrimination that paralyzes us from taking decisive action. It is the proclivity for gossip or complaint when our energies could be directed towards solutions. It is the inability to establish boundaries, resulting in overcommitment and the festering of resentment. These are not random misfortunes. They are often the subtle, quotidian mechanisms by which our internal maps guide us back to the familiar, even when that familiarity is profoundly detrimental. And how does the sensation of discomfort or internal resistance, experienced when approaching a goal, serve as a primary indicator of hidden self-sabotage? This sensation is your internal alarm system. When you are poised to take a step that challenges a foundational belief, your subconscious mind flags it as a potential threat. This threat can manifest as anxiety, a pervasive sense of dread, an abrupt wave of fatigue, or an overwhelming compulsion to engage in an alternative activity. You might experience a knot in your stomach, a racing heart, or a general undercurrent of unease. Frequently, we misinterpret this sensation. We conclude, "I must not truly desire this," or "I am simply not equipped for this undertaking," or "this is too arduous." We perceive the discomfort as an unequivocal signal to desist, an indication that we have strayed from the correct path. In reality, however, this discomfort is often a potent sign that you are indeed on the right path, that path that leads beyond your constricting core beliefs and towards your envisioned future. The resistance is not a directive to retreat. It is an indicator that you are actively pushing against the invisible confines of your internal map. The greater the intensity of the resistance, the more deeply entrenched the belief it is confronting. Learning to perceive this discomfort not as a caution to halt, but as a signpost pointing towards the locus of your most profound work is an indispensable step in transcending hidden self-sabotage. It signifies that your established map is being re-examined, and a new one is beginning to take shape. Comprehending these deeply ingrained patterns of self-sabotage represents the crucial initial phase. But how do we commence the arduous task of dismantling the very foundations of these beliefs that have so profoundly shaped our self-perception and our latent potential? The subsequent section will delve into the genesis of these beliefs and the subtle, yet formidable, methodologies by which they were initially imprinted. 2. Core identities and success. Success, we are often led to believe, is an external edifice, a grander house, a more coveted position, a fuller purse, or the adulation of others. And indeed, these can serve as potent indicators of advancement. Yet, authentic, enduring triumph transcends mere accumulation. It resides in the quality of our inner state. It is found in a profound tranquility, the quiet certainty of living in alignment with one's truest self. When the internal landscape, the bedrock of our self-perceptions, collides with the external aspirations we pursue, a peculiar phenomenon unfolds. We become our own most formidable impediment. It is akin to attempting a race with one's shoelaces inextricably bound. The desire to win, even the innate capacity for it, is rendered almost moot by the self-imposed constraint. This is precisely where our core beliefs, the subconscious cartographies we have charted of ourselves and our world, exert their profound influence. They do not merely delimit the realm of possibility, they define our very essence. And frequently, the identity we meticulously construct around these beliefs becomes an unexpected bulwark against the very success we yearn for. Consider the individual who navigated a childhood steeped in hardship. Perhaps their family grappled with persistent financial insecurity, or they felt perpetually estranged within the social milieu of their schooling. Through sheer tenacity and unremitting effort, they managed to ascend. This arduous journey may have imprinted a deeply held conviction: success is forged solely through struggle. This belief, born of lived experience, can calcify into an identity. I am the perpetual underdog. I am the one destined to battle for every inch. I am the struggler. On the surface, this identity can act as a formidable engine. It cultivates resilience, fuels determination, and underpins an admirable work ethic. It is the narrative of the self-made individual, a story that resonates with many. Yet, here lies the subtle irony. This identity can become so deeply ingrained, so intrinsic to our self-conception, that when success arrives without the familiar crucible of effort, it feels dissonant. Picture this: the dream job is secured, or a business venture blossoms with unexpected alacrity. Instead of unadulterated joy and pride, a disquieting unease may surface. Did I truly merit this? They might ponder. Was it too facile? Am I an imposter? Their subconscious mind, inextricably bound to the struggler persona, may perceive this effortless triumph as a threat. It disrupts the established narrative. It fails to resonate with the core tenet that hard work and tribulation are the exclusive conduits to achievement. The consequence? Unconsciously, they may begin to engineer obstacles. Deadlines might be missed, interpersonal conflicts instigated, or ill-advised decisions made, all serving to decelerate their progress. It is not a conscious desire to fail, but rather a subconscious imperative. Failure, or at least the introduction of difficulty, validates their ingrained identity as one who must perpetually contend. It is a means of affirming to themselves and perhaps to the world that they remain the underdog they perceive themselves to be. The subconscious, ever vigilant in preserving the familiar, even if steeped in discomfort, will frequently reinforce these detrimental beliefs and their attendant identities, for they represent a known, albeit often painful, sanctuary. This is not the sole manifestation of identity as a barrier to success. Consider the archetype of the self-destructive artist. This individual espouses the belief that their creativity, their unique brilliance, is intrinsically interwoven with their suffering or adversity. They might rationalize, my most profound work emerges only from a place of anguish. Or, in states of contentment and stability, my art risks becoming insipid. For such a person, success achieved through well-being can feel like a betrayal of their artistic soul. They may subconsciously undermine their own triumphs by adopting a difficult demeanor, neglecting crucial engagements, or even engaging in behaviors that precipitate their downfall. Their identity is so inextricably linked to the concept of the tormented genius that any deviation feels inauthentic. The prospect of embodying a creatively fulfilled, successful individual without the accompanying suffering can be profoundly unsettling, as it challenges the very bedrock of their self-definition. Then there is the hero or martyr identity. This individual conceives of themselves as a rescuer, a selfless contributor to a cause, or a bearer of burdens for the greater good. Their foundational belief might be, my worth is derived from my sacrifices, or I am most significant when I am salvaging others. While these qualities can be laudable, they can also foster a subtle form of self-sabotage in the realm of personal achievement. A hero or martyr might routinely defer their own ambitions to aid a friend, assume an overwhelming workload without protest, or eschew personal accolades, perceiving them as selfish or as detracting from the needs of others. A deep-seated unease may accompany the reception of recognition or reward, as it fails to align with their narrative of unalloyed service. Success, in its conventional guise, might be viewed as a distraction from their perceived higher calling, or worse, as evidence of insufficient sacrifice. The internal compulsion to maintain this identity can lead them to spurn opportunities that promise personal fulfillment and advancement simply because such prospects deviate from their deeply entrenched role as the giver or the savior. How, then, does one commence the excavation of these latent identities that may be impeding progress? It commences with posing fundamental inquiries transcending the superficial "what do I wish to achieve?" to probe the deeper strata. Who am I, at my innermost core? Or what is my fundamental purpose in existence? This necessitates a degree of introspection, a willingness to look beyond the roles we perform for others and to delve into the narrative we construct about our own inherent nature. Reflect on the stories you recount to yourself about the genesis of life's occurrences, particularly in relation to your successes and failures. Are you invariably the one who must contend? The one perpetually misunderstood? The one consistently overlooked? The one destined for greatness yet perpetually thwarted? Let us engage in a simple exercise. Take a moment to complete the following sentences, not with what you aspire to be true, but with what resonates, with profound and authentic veracity, even if it evokes discomfort. At my core, I am a. My principal aim in life is to. The world perceives me as, yet the truth is I am. Be candid. Refrain from self-censorship. Do the completions of these sentences employ words such as fighter, survivor, helper, rebel, outsider, creator, protector, underdog? These are indicators of your core identity. These are the roles you have unconsciously assumed, often from an early age, predicated on your nascent beliefs and experiences. The psychological tension inherent in this is considerable. Our core identity, even when it precipitates self-sabotage, represents a known territory. It is what the subconscious mind comprehends. It is familiar. It is, in a peculiar, paradoxical fashion, secure, for it is predictable. One knows what to anticipate from oneself if one is the struggler. One will labor diligently, encounter obstacles, and may or may not prevail, but the process itself is familiar. Embracing genuine, unhindered success can feel akin to stepping off a precipice into the unknown. It challenges the very definition of one's being. If one has perpetually believed that success necessitates struggle, what transpires when success arrives effortlessly? Does that render one's prior struggles devoid of meaning? Does it imply one has been fundamentally mistaken about oneself all along? Such questioning can feel like a direct assault on one's entire worldview, one's sense of self, and one's place in the cosmos. The subconscious mind, prioritizing survival and familiarity, will frequently instigate unconscious acts of self-sabotage to preserve this known, albeit constricting, comfort zone. It is simpler to falter in a manner that corroborates one's identity than to achieve in a way that compels a complete redefinition of the self. The crucial insight to grasp is that these identities are not immutable. They are constructs, erected upon the foundation of early beliefs. And just as they were formed, they can be understood, interrogated, and ultimately transmuted. Recognizing that the chains binding us to self-sabotage are frequently forged from the very identities we don is the pivotal, initial step. By comprehending these archetypal patterns and the narratives they espouse, we can initiate the process of dismantling them, thereby clearing a path for a more authentic and unencumbered pursuit of the success we genuinely desire. This burgeoning awareness is the key that unlocks the portal to revising our internal maps and stepping into a more empowering conception of self. 3. Adopted masks for survival. In the tender dawn of our existence, the world often looms as an expanse of bewildering unknowns. Lacking the compass of experience, we can find ourselves adrift in a sea of apprehension, the sheer immensity of it, all a palpable weight. Our elders, our mentors, those who populate our nascent universe, serve as our cartographers charting the territories of existence. Yet, what transpires when these guides falter, or when the very fabric of reality seems laced with unseen perils? It is in such crucible moments that we begin to forge what is termed a mask. This is no mere adornment for the face, no costume to be shed with the dawn. It is an internal edifice, a carefully constructed facade of behavior and presentation conceived to safeguard our vulnerability and secure our needs. Imagine it as a bespoke armor done to confront the world's exigencies. This armor is a tool of survival, and for the child, survival reigns supreme. Consider young Lily. Her parents, caught in the currents of their own anxieties, often existed in a state of palpable stress. Lily discovered a profound truth: her quietude, her lack of demands, seemed to suit the tempest within her home. Conversely, the tentative unfurling of her emotions, particularly those tinged with sorrow or ire, might elicit distress or outright dismissal. Thus, Lily learned that the path of least resistance, the conduit to attention, lay in agreeable silence. The notion that her feelings held little currency, or worse, were a source of disruption, began to take root. Her mask coalesced into the persona of the good, quiet girl. Each day, this guise was donned, and with each passing moment, it felt less like an imposition and more like an intrinsic aspect of her being. The awareness of its presence often dissolved entirely. Or turn your gaze to Sam. His father, a relentless critic, wielded his son's every misstep as a source of derision. Embarrassment and a gnawing hurt became Sam's constant companions. To erect a bulwark against this ceaseless barrage of disapproval, Sam cultivated a defense mechanism: humor. He transformed every situation, even those that plunged him into despair, into a jest. He discovered that by eliciting laughter, he could divert attention from his perceived flaws and deflect the sting of his own discomfort. His mask became the class clown. This persona offered a semblance of control and a fleeting sense of belonging, yet it also erected an impenetrable barrier, obscuring his genuine vulnerability and stifling his capacity to seek succor when truly needed. These masks are not the product of deliberate deception, they are rather the brilliant, instinctual strategies our younger selves devise to navigate treacherous landscapes. We embraced these personas because, in the stark reality of our circumstances, they appeared to be the sole means of passage. If parental strictures were severe, one might assume the mantle of the perfect child to evade censure. In the maelstrom of a chaotic upbringing, the role of the peacemaker might be adopted to quell the internal storms. If a sense of invisibility pervaded, the guise of the overachiever could be donned in a desperate bid to validate one's existence. Each of these masks fulfilled a critical imperative: to court approval, to ward off disdain, to shield ourselves from emotional lacerations, or simply to conform to perceived expectations. They were our shields and our passports to belonging. This is where the axiom U equals assumes profound significance. As we increasingly inhabit these adopted personas, particularly during the formative years of childhood, a subtle yet potent transformation occurs. The mask begins to eclipse the self. We start to believe that the facade is our identity. The child who mastered the art of placid agreement begins to internalize, "I am the quiet one." The child who honed the craft of the jester starts to believe, "I am inherently lighthearted and amusing, even when my spirit is wounded." The performance transmutes into identity. This is not a mere charade. It is a deep, unconscious assimilation. The foundational beliefs we internalize are inextricably linked to these adopted personas. If the bedrock of your self-perception became "I am insufficient," you might have cultivated the mask of the perfectionist, perpetually striving to disprove this conviction, ironically reinforcing it by pursuing an unattainable ideal. Your identification with the mask becomes so absolute that to question it is to question the very essence of your being. It is akin to attempting to shed one's own skin, a prospect fraught with peril and profound unnaturalness. It is precisely this deeply ingrained imperative that compels our subconscious mind to vigilantly preserve these beliefs and the masks they engender. It prioritizes the familiar, however discomforting, because the unknown represents an existential threat. Once these masks are firmly established, and we come to perceive them as our authentic selves, a potent, self-perpetuating cycle is initiated. Our actions begin to align with and confirm the mask's existence. If you have internalized the belief that you are the shy person, you will unconsciously steer clear of social arenas that might challenge this deeply held conviction. You may interpret innocuous remarks as veiled criticisms or deliberately steer conversations away from avenues that necessitate greater outwardness. Your perception of the world begins to warp, filtering all experiences through the lens of your adopted identity. Sam, the perennial class clown, might find himself inadvertently sabotaging opportunities for genuine human connection. When confronted with overt urges to discuss his inner world, he may resort to a quip, creating distance. He may eschew situations where he cannot maintain his comedic persona, thereby constricting his life's experiences. This is not a conscious act of defiance. Rather, his mask is orchestrating his behavior to ensure its own perpetuation. He actively seeks experiences that validate his comedic identity, thereby reinforcing the belief that this persona must be maintained at all times. This relentless performance, even when characterized by an outward display of levity, is profoundly draining and precludes the possibility of being truly seen. Herein lies the profound cost of the mask. What once served as a sanctuary now becomes the very shackles that bind us. They are architects of self-sabotage, for the demands of the mask frequently stand in opposition to our authentic desires and our inherent potential. Consider Lily, the embodiment of the good, quiet girl. She might possess a groundbreaking idea for a professional endeavor, yet her mask whispers, refrain from drawing attention, remain unobtrusive. Consequently, she remains silent, and the opportunity evaporates. Her yearning for recognition and contribution is thwarted by the survival strategy forged in her youth. Sam, the class clown, may harbor a deep-seated desire for profound, intimate connection. However, his comedic persona acts as a barrier, preventing him from revealing his vulnerabilities, his apprehensions, or his need for solace. He may deploy humor as a shield when insecurity surfaces, inadvertently pushing away potential partners, fearing that the unveiling of his true self would precipitate the very rejection his mask was designed to avert. The mask, once his protector, now obstructs his pursuit of the connection he so deeply craves. This incessant imperative to maintain the facade breeds a pervasive sense of inauthenticity. Beneath the surface, a knowing awareness of something missing persists, a disconnect between the individual presented to the world and the true self within. It is akin to observing the world through a one-way mirror. We can perceive outward, but our inner reality remains concealed. This can manifest as a quiet melancholy, a feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood, or even a profound sense of emptiness, as the aspects of ourselves concealed behind the mask languish, starved of expression. Thus, how do we commence the arduous task of discerning these adopted masks? It necessitates a gentle yet unflinching introspection. Begin by attuning yourself to recurring patterns in the tapestry of your life. What are the narratives you construct about your own identity? Are there particular modes of conduct that feel performative even in solitude? Do you find yourself responding to analogous situations with predictable, ingrained reactions, even when those responses no longer serve you effectively? Direct your attention to the circumstances that evoke the greatest discomfort or a sense of stagnation. What role do you invariably assume in these scenarios? Are you perpetually the conciliator, striving to appease others? Are you consistently the one who deflects with levity? Are you invariably the one who shoulders an excessive burden? These are significant indicators. The mask typically manifests with heightened intensity when we are under duress or perceive ourselves to be threatened, even if that threat exists solely within the confines of our minds. Pose the question, what am I endeavoring to achieve through this particular mode of conduct? What am I striving to evade? This inquiry can illuminate the original purpose underpinning the mask. For Lily, the archetype of the good, quiet girl, the underlying impetus was likely a profound need for security and affirmation. For Sam, the embodiment of the class clown, it was probably a quest for acceptance and a mechanism to deflect pain. Comprehending the genesis of these patterns does not absolve them of their present-day limitations, but it does foster a sense of compassion for your younger self, who was navigating life with the best tools at their disposal. It is also profoundly beneficial to acknowledge moments when you perceive a dissonance between your overt actions and your internal, emotional landscape. If you are experiencing sadness, but projecting an outward demeanor of resilience, this is a salient indicator of a mask at play. If you harbor a fervent desire to voice your thoughts, but remain conspicuously silent, this is your mask actively engaged. This is not an exercise in self-condemnation, rather, it is an act of mindful observation, undertaken with genuine curiosity. Imagine yourself as an intrepid detective of your own inner cosmos, meticulously seeking the subtle signs that betray the presence of your hidden persona. These adopted masks, born of an urgent necessity, have metamorphosed into the invisible ramparts of our self-imposed prisons. While they once served as our guardians, they now act as impediments to our capacity for authentic living. The subsequent phase in dismantling these formidable chains involves a profound understanding of the specific narratives and archetypes we have unconsciously internalized, for it is within these deeply ingrained stories that our most profound limitations are invariably concealed. 4. Practicing radical honesty. We often harbor the illusion of profound self-knowledge, believing we grasp the intricacies of our actions, the genesis of our emotions, and the trajectory of our lives. Yet, beneath this veneer of comprehension, a potent, unseen force frequently sculpts our reality in ways we seldom suspect. This force is our internal cartography, a landscape meticulously etched by early beliefs, so deeply ingrained they become as fundamental as the air we inhale. When this internal atlas misdirects us, precipitating recurring errors, inducing stagnation, or undermining our own triumphs, we are prone to attributing blame to external caprices or perceived personal deficiencies. However, the bedrock truth, as we shall meticulously excavate, frequently resides within the narratives we have unconsciously woven and the verities we have assiduously evaded. Our minds are remarkably adept at safeguarding us, a crucial faculty for navigating life's labyrinthine passages. Yet, this protective instinct can also manifest as a bulwark against uncomfortable self-revelations. Consider it thus: if a deeply embedded conviction dictates your inadequacy, your mind will diligently orchestrate experiences to validate this premise. It will selectively filter perceptions, amplify setbacks, and diminish successes, all in service of maintaining the fidelity of that foundational belief. This is not a conscious decree. It is the brain executing its mandate to preserve familiarity and perceive safety, even when that familiarity is steeped in discomfort. We construct elaborate rationales, justifications, and stratagems to keep these disquieting truths sequestered. We might self-diagnose as indolent when, in fact, we are paralyzed by the specter of failure. We may perceive ourselves as misfortune's plaything when, in truth, we are ensnared by the predictable repercussions of choices rooted in a limiting core belief. This artifice is not an act of perfidy toward others. It is a profound deception directed inward. This is the crucible where the concept of radical honesty crystallizes, not necessarily as an uninhibited public broadcast of every fleeting thought, but as an unwavering internal covenant to confront our own fundamental truths. The guiding principle, borrowed from more austere practices, is elegantly simple yet profoundly impactful. Articulate your truth, irrespective of its potential to evoke discomfort or embarrassment. When internalized, this translates to an unblinking scrutiny of our own behaviors, motivations, and sentiments. It compels us to pose the most arduous questions to ourselves and to embrace the unvarnished honesty of the answers, even when they stand in stark opposition to the narratives we have cultivated for ourselves and others. This stringent candor functions as a potent diagnostic instrument, akin to illuminating the shadowy recesses of our consciousness, thereby exposing the clandestine patterns and deeply buried core beliefs that have orchestrated our existence. Observe Sarah. For years, Sarah perceived herself as a perpetual underdog. She would embark on ambitious endeavors with fervent zeal, only to falter at some juncture. Deadlines would elude her, discouragement would swiftly take root, and her aspirations would ultimately wither, leaving her to confide in friends and family that things simply never transpire favorably for me. She saw herself as destined for mediocrity, a pawn of circumstance. This narrative, while deeply entrenched, was a meticulously crafted shield. One day, amidst a particularly disheartening setback, Sarah found herself gazing into her reflection, tears welling. Instead of the customary lamentation of her ill fortune, a novel inquiry surfaced. What if I am choosing this? This question, born from a moment of stark despair, was the inaugural fissure in her meticulously constructed edifice. She resolved to deviate from her established pattern. She began to write not merely about her frustrations, but about the actual emotions underpinning them. She chronicled the paralyzing dread of failure that would seize her as a project began to gain traction. She articulated the deeply embedded conviction that should she achieve success, she would be incapable of bearing the ensuing pressure, or worse, that she was undeserving of it. She acknowledged the solace she derived from the familiar narrative of being the underdog, a story that absolved her from the inherent risks of genuine accomplishment. This act of transcription, of confronting these concealed, disquieting verities, constituted Sarah's personal manifestation of radical honesty. While she harbored no immediate intention of divulging these raw confessions, the very act of their acknowledgement to herself proved transformative. She apprehended that her underdog identity was not an accurate reflection of her reality, but rather a self-imposed construct predicated on a series of conscious and unconscious omissions. She had omitted the salient fact that she actively undermined her own efforts, that she prioritized the solace of her familiar narrative over the potential for authentic triumph. The psychological mechanisms at play are profoundly compelling. Our ego, the very core of our self-perception, craves an unbroken narrative. It yearns to believe in our rationality, our inherent goodness, and the coherence of our life experiences. When confronted with evidence that challenges this self-image, for instance, the realization that we are inadvertently orchestrating our own predicaments due to a core belief such as I am fundamentally incapable, the ego can perceive itself as imperiled. To fortify itself, it deploys defense mechanisms. We might rationalize our actions: I was simply too fatigued, deny the existence of the problem it is not of significant consequence, or project our own perceived failings onto others. These are all stratagems designed to preserve the integrity of our internal compass, even when that compass is guiding us toward ruin. Radical honesty, in its purest form, circumvents these defenses. By committing to the utterance of unvarnished truth, we compel these suppressed beliefs and motivations into the light of day. When Sarah penned, "I am apprehensive of succeeding because I doubt my capacity to manage it," she was not merely stating a fact. She was dismantling a core belief that had been operating insidiously beneath the surface. This belief, likely forged in childhood through experiences where her achievements were either overlooked or met with censure, had become a fundamental tenet of her self-concept. Now, by bringing it into conscious awareness, she could commence its interrogation. This leads us to the second analytical query: how may individuals integrate elements of radical honesty into their daily existence to unearth deeply ingrained, potentially self-defeating, core beliefs, transcending mere extreme exemplification? The answer lies in a gentle, yet unyielding, application of self-truthfulness. It is not about vociferously proclaiming one's insecurities from the rooftops. It is about cultivating a sanctuary for introspective inquiry. A practical avenue for this is journaling. Beyond a mere chronicle of events, endeavor to probe the genesis of your feelings and actions. When a potent emotion arises, be it anger, sorrow, or frustration, pause and interrogate yourself. What is the absolute, unadulterated truth of my present emotional state? What core belief might be precipitating this reaction? For example, if you harbor resentment towards a colleague who has received a promotion you desired, rather than simply musing, "They were merely fortunate," ask yourself, what does this scenario reveal about my own belief in my inherent right to success? The honest retort might be, "I believe I am less deserving than they are," or "I believe that diligent effort does not invariably yield rewards for individuals like myself." These are luminous glimpses into the architecture of core beliefs. Another methodology involves mindful self-observation. Throughout the course of your day, attune yourself to the internal dialogues you engage in. Observe when you rationalize your comportment, when you diminish your accomplishments, or when you attribute your struggles to external forces. Ask yourself, am I presenting the complete truth in this internal narrative? Or is there an element I am omitting to shield myself or maintain a particular persona, even if solely for my own consumption? This necessitates a willingness to embrace discomfort, to acknowledge that your actions may be driven by apprehension, insecurity, or a deeply entrenched belief that has outlived its utility. Consider David. David harbored a core belief that he was intrinsically unlovable. This conviction stemmed from formative experiences where his parents, while not deliberately cruel, maintained an emotional distance and frequently subjected him to criticism. As an adult, David found himself ensnared in a cycle of relationship sabotage. Precisely when connections began to deepen, he would concoct pretexts to distance himself, convinced that his supposed flaw would inevitably be discovered, leading to abandonment. He would instigate arguments, adopt an overly critical stance, or simply withdraw, all the while rationalizing, "See, I knew they wouldn't remain." Through the practice of journaling, David commenced an exploration of these recurring patterns. He recognized that his narrative of pushing them away before they can leave me served as a defense mechanism. The radical honesty he embraced lay in acknowledging the raw, agonizing truth. I am actively repelling them because I am consumed by the dread of rejection, and I am persuaded that rejection is an inescapable outcome, as I am fundamentally unlovable. This admission exacted a profound personal toll. It directly contradicted the self-image he aspired to embody, that of someone merely navigating the vicissitudes of romantic misfortune. However, by confronting this truth, by acknowledging the core belief of unlovability, he finally possessed the capacity to challenge it. He began to pose the question, is it genuinely true that I am unlovable? Or is this a belief I formed in the distant past, predicated on a limited series of painful encounters? The intrinsic connection between our identities and the discrepancies we perpetuate is paramount here. We frequently construct identities built upon a selective portrayal of reality. The rebel may emphasize their defiance while downplaying an underlying fear of conformity. The victim may highlight their hardships while minimizing their own capacity for agency. These identities, while offering a sense of belonging or a predictable framework for navigating existence, transform into prisons when they are founded upon omissions and self-deception. Radical honesty challenges these fabricated identities by demanding that we embrace the totality of our being, encompassing both the aspects we deem virtuous and those we perceive as ignominious. When David finally confessed to himself that his fear of rejection was the driving force behind his conduct, he was dismantling the persona of the unlucky in love individual and creating space for the possibility of a man capable of vulnerability and reciprocal affection. The liberating efficacy of truth, even when it carries the sting of pain, cannot be overstated. The sheer magnitude of energy expended in maintaining these internal falsehoods, these meticulously curated narratives, is staggering. It is akin to the relentless exertion required to hold a beach ball submerged beneath the water's surface. When we finally release our grip, when we acknowledge the truth, that pent-up energy is liberated. For Sarah, this meant the realization that her underdog status was a self-imposed constraint, not an immutable destiny. For David, it signified an understanding that his pattern of self-sabotage was rooted in a belief that could be actively contested rather than an inherent defect that defined his essence. This is not to imply that the practice of radical honesty is an effortless undertaking. It is often the most arduous labor we will ever undertake. It demands the courage to examine ourselves without recourse to judgment, to accept the uncomfortable realities of our past and present. It signifies an acknowledgement that we have, perhaps for years, been navigating with a flawed internal map, a map drawn with assumptions that have long since ceased to serve us. Yet, it is within this very willingness to confront our own self-deception, to articulate our deepest truths to ourselves, that we commence the process of breaking free from the shackles that bind us. By comprehending the narratives we weave and the truths we have concealed, we unlock the potential to reauthor them, to forge a new map, one that guides us not toward familiar suffering, but toward authentic growth and boundless possibility. This emergent clarity forms the bedrock upon which we can begin to comprehend why we become ensnared and, more crucially, how to consciously select a divergent, more empowering narrative for our lives moving forward. 5. Comfort zones and beliefs. The destinations we frequent, the pursuits we undertake, and the companions we cherish often masquerade as deliberate selections. We assure ourselves of an appreciation for the well-trodden path, a preference for the predictable. But what if this perceived predilection is, in truth, a meticulously crafted prison, forged by the very bedrock of our self-conceptions and our understanding of the world? This lies at the heart of the subtle yet potent nexus between our sanctuaries of comfort and the foundational tenets we internalized long ago. Regard your comfort zone not merely as a haven of ease, but as a dynamic, sentient entity. It is the milieu where the familiar reigns, where safety is paramount. Yet, safety is not invariably synonymous with well-being. Should a deeply ingrained conviction, for instance, assert, "I am fundamentally insufficient," your comfort zone will invariably serve as the proving ground for this very assertion. You might forego the pursuit of advancement, convinced of an inevitable downfall. You might recoil from profound connections, believing that intimacy will inevitably reveal your unworthiness. Each instance of refraining from a challenge or withholding genuine engagement is not simply an act of remaining within your comfort zone. It is an active cultivation of the very belief that you are, in fact, not enough. Your comfort zone thus transforms into a self-perpetuating cycle, a sanctuary where your most deeply held convictions are perpetually validated, irrespective of the suffering they inflict. Our subconscious mind operates as a vigilant guardian, perpetually attuned to our perceived welfare. Its primary mandate is survival. From this vantage point, the comfort zone represents the ultimate stratagem for enduring, because it is known. Even if this known territory is fraught with pain and limitation, it remains predictable. Your core beliefs, even those of a negative cast, have been your constant companions. They have accompanied you through childhood's tender years, through adolescence's tumultuous passage, through the nascent stages of adulthood. Your subconscious has learned to equate these beliefs with mere subsistence, with navigating the currents of existence. Consequently, when confronted with novelty, with that which might usher in growth and felicity but also carries the specter of failure or the unknown, your subconscious issues a stark alarm, danger. It is immeasurably simpler and ostensibly safer to adhere to the familiar, even if the familiar manifests as a pervasive sense of inadequacy or discontent. The pain of the known, in a curious paradox, offers a form of solace precisely because it is predictable. The unknown, conversely, looms as an existential threat, and your core beliefs stand as the sentinels of this perceived security. This phenomenon grows all the more compelling when we observe the unconscious resistance some individuals exhibit towards effortless success. You have likely encountered narratives of the underdog, the saga of relentless struggle that imbues their eventual triumph with profound resonance. If your core belief posits you as an underdog, or dictates that achievement is inextricably linked to arduous endeavor, then a period of unburdened accomplishment can evoke profound disquiet. Envision an individual perpetually convinced, "I must toil for every gain." Suddenly, a promotion arrives with minimal exertion, or a project unfolds with remarkable fluidity. This unlabored victory disrupts their internal narrative. It feels foreign, almost unearned. Their subconscious, still calibrated to anticipate struggle, may then erect internal impediments. They might begin to procrastinate on new responsibilities, instigate gratuitous disputes with colleagues, or even engineer errors that undermine their progress. The reason? The struggle has become their comfort zone. Effortless success imperils their fundamental self-perception and their established worldview, compelling them to unconsciously sabotage themselves, thereby returning to the familiar terrain of hard-won battles. Our core beliefs transcend mere notions. They are the master architects of our limitations. They do not merely suggest our capabilities, they define what we deem even conceivable for ourselves. If a core belief whispers, "Love inevitably succumbs to complexity and culminates in heartbreak," then your relational comfort zone will likely be characterized by drama, misinterpretation, or perhaps a recurring pattern of preemptively severing ties to forestall hurt. You may find yourself drawn to partners emotionally unavailable, or you may habitually instigate conflict where none inherently exists. The prospect of a relationship that is simple, affectionate, and mutually supportive may feel alien, even unsettling, because it diverges from your deeply ingrained convictions. Your belief system has delineated the boundaries of your existence, dictating what is permissible, what is secure, and what lies irrevocably beyond your grasp. This often leads us to believe that our inertia is a product of volition. We profess, "I choose to remain in this employment," or "I choose not to pursue that aspiration." Yet, upon closer inspection, we frequently discover that alternative avenues are not even perceived as viable. It is not that we are incapable of discerning other paths. Rather, our internal compass, calibrated by core beliefs, filters them out or distorts them into undesirable forms. If you hold the conviction, "I lack the creative wherewithal to establish my own enterprise," then the notion of embarking on entrepreneurship might appear as a trajectory towards certain ruin, rather than a potential conduit for fulfilling your passions. The perceived paucity of viable alternatives is not an objective reality. It is a direct consequence of the constrictive lens imposed by your core beliefs. Your subconscious mind, in its endeavor to safeguard you and preserve the status quo dictated by these beliefs, presents a circumscribed array of options, rendering the comfort zone the sole seemingly rational or secure choice. Thus, the comfort zone, that space we frequently associate with repose and tranquility, is in actuality a highly operative defense mechanism. It is a dominion meticulously constructed and fiercely defended by the very architecture of our core beliefs. These beliefs, originating in our formative years, serve as the blueprint for this internal citadel. They dictate what is familiar, what is predictable, and what, in the estimation of our subconscious, is survivable. To commence a genuine liberation from the invisible fetters that constrain us, we must first apprehend this fundamental truth, that perceived barriers surrounding us are not external impediments. They are internal constructs, painstakingly assembled from the earliest assumptions we formulated about ourselves and the world. Acknowledging this is the inaugural and perhaps most critical step in commencing their dismantling. It is the nascent realization that the map we have been employing to navigate life may be obsolete, and that the boundaries it delineates are not necessarily veridical. Conclusion: you have ventured into the labyrinthine architecture of your inner cosmos, navigating the intricate tapestry of core beliefs that have, until now, silently orchestrated your every endeavor. This expedition, though potentially illuminating, has likely stirred moments of profound disquiet. You have even embarked on an examination of this internal cartography, this constellation of assumptions and deeply ingrained notions, often forged in the crucible of formative years, represents a monumental undertaking. It is this internal atlas that dictates the very lens through which you perceive both the external world and your own internal landscape. Your fortitude in engaging with this introspective work, your courage in turning your gaze inward, stands as a powerful testament to your burgeoning desire for a life imbued with greater depth and authenticity. Consider this not an endpoint, but rather the pivotal moment when the compass has been placed squarely in your hands. The map itself is now emerging from the mists, and with its burgeoning clarity arrives the potent capacity to chart your own course. The paramount achievement of our shared exploration is the profound transition from the shadows of unconsciousness into the luminous realm of conscious awareness. You have discovered that the appellations and accumulated experiences of your past were not mere ephemeral moments, but rather the very architects of your foundational core beliefs. These beliefs, conceived during epochs when your understanding was nascent and your choices circumscribed, became the immutable filters through which all subsequent information was processed. They were sculpted by the pronouncements of authority figures, the pervasive murmurs of societal expectation, and the limited scope of your own direct encounters. Your subconscious mind, ever vigilant in its mandate to safeguard you within the familiar, clung tenaciously to these beliefs, even when they served as invisible shackles. This explains the potent allure of archetypes such as the perpetual underdog or the self-immolating artist. They are potent manifestations of deeply entrenched core beliefs about our inherent worth and deservingness. Your subconscious, guided by this ingrained compass, has been assiduously maintaining a reality that, while often fraught with pain, is at least known. This engenders a curious paradox. We can find solace in the familiar, even when that familiarity inflicts suffering, for it is the terrain of the known. The prospect of dismantling these foundational core beliefs can indeed feel akin to destabilizing the very bedrock of your existence, a prospect that is undeniably daunting. Yet, the sovereign power to redraft your internal atlas, to meticulously update your core beliefs, resides squarely within the sphere of your conscious volition. It is here that the true labor and the ultimate liberation commences. The transformation of core beliefs is not an act of erasure, nor a feigned amnesia regarding your past. It is, rather, a profound reinterpretation, a deliberate and conscious election of new foundational narratives to underpin your present and illuminate your future. This is an ongoing odyssey, a continuous practice, not a singular, definitive resolution. Each instance in which you interrogate a limiting core belief, posing the incisive questions, is this belief truly serving me? Does it hold an unassailable truth? From whence did it truly originate? You are actively dismantling its dominion. By consciously selecting novel narratives and aligning your actions with their compelling logic, you commence the arduous yet rewarding process of forging new, empowering core beliefs. This is the very genesis of the tangible act of redrawing your internal map. The discomfort you experience when confronting an entrenched core belief is merely the friction of your old cartography yielding to the emergence of a new one. It is the undeniable signal that growth is in vigorous motion. The practice of radical honesty, in its purest form, is an act of confronting the narratives that perpetuate your old core beliefs and deliberately choosing authenticity and advancement in their stead. It is the courageous act of scrutinizing the stories you tell yourself and discerning whether they still serve your highest good. Your pilgrimage with your internal map and the core beliefs that constitute its very essence, is an ongoing expedition. As you navigate the ever-shifting currents of new experiences, you will invariably encounter opportunities to further refine and evolve your core beliefs. There will be moments when the siren call of old patterns resurfaces, when the comforting familiarity of an antiquated belief beckons. This is an entirely natural phenomenon. The crucial element is to recognize its presence, to gently guide it back into the illuminating light of conscious awareness, and to steadfastly reaffirm the new map you are meticulously charting. The ultimate triumph lies not in the attainment of a static destination, but in the perpetual, conscious act of shaping your reality through the intentional evolution of your core beliefs. The pen is now unequivocally in your grasp. Proceed and continue to meticulously draw the most authentic and empowering map of your existence.